Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out our shows and join the conversation at thehippocratic-collective.com. Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I feel like in many spaces in which I work and even just friendships I have in the healthcare space, this particular healthcare human keeps coming up as a guy that I have to talk to. Everyone's like, you got to talk to Michael. And I'm like, okay, I guess I apparently have to. So at long last, it's happening. So excited. So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone listening?
Pleasure to be here. So my name's Michael Quon. I'm a general internist in Ottawa. Clinically, I practice at the Ottawa Hospital, which is the large academic hospital in town. And separate to that, I've transitioned I came from a place of practice and returning to work with disability to becoming a dedicated advocate for improving disability inclusion. And then that has thankfully sort of led to multiple initiatives and projects. And so now I'm leading research, program development, community leadership, among others. I mean, there's sort of a growing list of areas that I'm contributing on in this space now. So I'm happy to talk more about that in any capacity today.
Amazing. I would love actually just to start at the beginning. I find it helpful to hear someone's origin story a bit. So for you, what was your journey like getting into medicine? Are you someone who always knew you wanted to be a doctor, or like, how did you end up with the MD behind your name?
Question. I think I always sort of thought about it as I was going through undergraduate studies, and I hadn't really committed to it, I guess, but I always liked the idea of the combination of science and humanism and caring for others, and separately to the challenges of clinical medicine. I liked that kind of mix, and that's what ended up drawing me into medicine.
And then internal, was that like a done deal, or like how did you end up in internal medicine?
Not at all. So I was open-minded. Entered clerkship, didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, nowadays the students have to know, it seems, quite early
Yeah.
on. But I was open-minded. I was drawn to internal medicine because I just felt like in the hospital world, internists were providing a really, they were the most responsible physicians, providing sort of more comprehensive care than like a lot of the subspecialists, and that drew me to like the comprehensive care of patients, but also I liked the team-based environment and the kind of clinical and academic sort of structure that a lot of the CTUs have. So I enjoyed that environment to work.
I'm so glad there are people that enjoy that environment. Like genuinely, that sounds like kind of shady, but because I am not a human that did, but obviously we need people there. And especially, I hope they're all there because they enjoy it. So that's so lovely to hear. I'm curious for you. Uh, I know folks that listen, one of the things that draws them is that they're finding it tough to feel human in healthcare. They're finding that the training, the long hours, the expectations from patients, that sort of thing, can often get you in a space where you're feeling like your humanity and your human body needs, like spiritual needs, whatever, need to be put on the back burner. And often that's a way that leads to burnout. In your early career, like in training, um, did you start to notice any of that happening for you? Sometimes people, escape it, but others do notice that some of those like hidden curriculum pieces of medical culture and the long hours and expectations can be challenging. How was that for you?
Um, Absolutely. I mean, the residency journey was very demanding, and as everyone else who goes through it has experienced, like the long hours, demanding workloads, stressors, expectations on learning, studying for the Royal College exam at the same time. Like it was all sort of yeah, very demanding, I would say. But like I guess I was one of those people who, at least in my residency, like I was a good soldier. I would go in there, I would not complain, I would suck it up, and just keep plugging away. And I think that's a common experience that a lot of residents share, and you're almost culturally just desensitized to the whole thing, and it becomes your life, and you're surrounded by others doing the same thing, and it becomes the norm. So you just kind of accept it and carry on.
Yeah, it's so true. So then for you, you mentioned you had an experience that disrupted the arc somewhere along the ways. And I find that's true of most people who end up on my podcast, they haven't just had the like normative arc. Something's happened to disrupt their life and then made them say, maybe like, you know, the ones and zeros in the matrix or whatever. Like seeing there's a bit more to this than be a good soldier and you'll get through and retire in a few decades. So, um, and only what you want to share. I know you share about disability a lot, but of course, if there's any like sensitive details, whatever feels comfortable to share, like what was your experience of disruption to the narrative?
Yeah, the word disruption is I don't know, feels mild in my context, but
Yeah.
absolutely, it was a major disruption. I was so I'd gone through all my whole training, and I used to be a pretty avid road cyclist, and so I went on a trip at the end of residency to like celebrate the end of residency with a couple of friends, and we went to Colorado, and we cycled through the Rockies and had a great trip. And then yeah, on the last day of the trip itself, I was in an unwitnessed high speed crash. It I mean, basically, I was taken by ambulance to the nearest trauma center in Denver, and eventually diagnosed with a moderate traumatic brain injury. And then once I was stabilized, I was um, returned to Canada, and started my rehab and a long, slow process of recovery. Inpatient rehab for a couple months, and then outpatient rehab, sort of for the next year. And yeah, then I mean, I could talk in more detail about that experience, but then it was kind of getting back to work with disability, and all the challenges that's faced with that.
Yeah. Um, I'm wondering in particular about that time. I know for many folks, probably in lots of jobs, but there's something about the brain and medicine. Like if you are a physician, you likely were praised for having quite a good brain, quite a smart brain. I know for myself, for a long time before I started to do more sort of embodiment type practices and like connecting with my body, I kind of like thought of myself as just like a bunch of cloud of thoughts in a brain and that had a body attached. So I can think that for someone, I'm curious if it resonates to think of like your brain being sort of the prize organ that you would prefer not to have difficulties with. What kind of challenges that created for you then as you're considering going back to medicine?
Well, it was never um I guess a consideration of going back, but like I mean, initially I was very concerned, like that I would never return to work. And the future was unknown. You know, nobody could give me a clear prognosis. You know, the brain injury physiatrist was encouraging and said there's others who have gone back to work, and you know it takes a period of time, but like you know the amount of sort of ongoing disability was unclear. The level of brain function, cognitive function recovery was a bit unclear as well, and so yeah, absolutely, I mean, I was very stressed and anxious about the future, and um, you know, it was the challenge of my life for sure, and getting through the rehab and that sort of recovery journey.
Yeah. So had you actually finished your residency at that point, or was it just at the end?
So I at the time of my accident, I was still technically a resident.
Hmm.
However, I had finished. It was like
Okay.
literally like the day before the end of residency. Yeah. So, but in a way, it was helpful that I was still a resident somewhat because you know the recovery and reentry to work was daunting to say the least, and thankfully I was at McGill and they were able to offer me a few months extra of like you know, not, I forget what they called it, but like non accredited or additional rotational time to you know to be under the supervision of an attending physician and not to be the you know the most responsible physician, which I had never really done other than a little bit of locum work. So it was you know really helpful to re-enter as a resident. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, honestly, it would have been helpful if I had longer. But anyway, all that to say, it was you know convenient that I actually had not finished residency.
Yeah. It's sort of a unique situation. I know there are physicians that are directly employed by an employer, but not so much in Canada. And I think of like I'm a family physician, and so I help patients in their disability and return to work journeys. And lots of times, they're going back to a company, and the company has an HR department, and like sometimes they even have like occupational health, and then they can go through quite a detailed process and accommodations and that sort of thing. But for us physicians, I mean, depending on the work, like we're our own boss and that's it. Or like in a hospital structure, they're kind of your boss or they're kind of not your boss. And so that can leave a lot on your plate to actually try and figure out accommodations and who's overseeing them. Only you? Or like how does that work actually as then you started to practice independently?
So this is a huge issue. There
Yeah.
is yes, there is not. So I mean, I'm hospital based, but like a lot of physicians are clinic based, and but even in the hospital institutional setting, like there is often not. I mean, there is rarely somebody who is assigned to help physicians return to work, you know, following medical leave or disability. Um, and physicians are regulated by one another, and so it's you know there's so many layers to that. Like there's you know the question of getting and acquiring the accommodations you need. it's often led by a physician leader who may or may not have knowledge or experience with the accommodations process. And HR typically focuses on hospital employees rather than physicians in the hospital setting. Um, and then, I'm a great example of this. Like, I was struggling with this process, and I was wondering who could help. And so I reach out to the physician health program. This is both in Quebec and Ontario, and they both admitted to me that they are more focused on substance use and mental health conditions, and that was quite disappointing to know that the physician health program, you know, didn't have a lot of experience with this kind of particular situation. And so, yeah, you're totally, it felt like I was totally on my own trying to figure it out, self advocate for what I needed and trying to understand what I was protected to. And, you know, it was totally shocking that it was the way it was.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any examples of then how you moved forward. So like did you immediately go to Ottawa next or like what was your first job out of residency then technically after the extra time at McGill?
Yeah, so I had a position like to start work at a community hospital in Montreal, where I was supposed to start like a full-time position in July. And I don't want to get into all the details, I guess, but like it was a challenging place for me to work at part-time, reduced workload capacity. And after a period of time, I knew it was not really the best place for me to keep going. And so then I was looking for, work, knowing I needed work accommodations. And so that was another challenge in itself, like how to approach hospitals, how and when to disclose, all the while still trying to, be competitive and look good and, be a good candidate for the job. So it was a tense kind of uncertain kind of way to do it. And again, I was trying to figure it out on my own and talking to people and, trying to figure out the
Brutal.
best way to go forward.
Yeah. What did you decide, especially with the disclosing part of it? What were your early attempts at, leading with it or holding back?
Um, I think, so I mean, just so you understand, like I still I was working, but like I just needed accommodations in terms of like not too high workload,
Yeah.
no overnight call to optimize, sleep and cognitive. Um, and Yeah, those were and no emergency room work just because I found the environment like too just too stimulating and difficult to focus. So yeah, so those were like my core kind of accommodations, but it was, I mean, I basically knew I had to disclose. Like I couldn't do those types of workloads, but like I tried to not disclose in an email, for example, to a hospital like physician leadership, that it was more in like a meeting with them to sort of explain what I needed and what my challenges were. And at the same time, I was trying to show that like I could still do the work and show that I was capable. And that was my big fear, was that I would be viewed as not as good or not as quality a physician because of that injury. So that was the big challenge.
Yeah. In one way, the thing that strikes me is like you were saying, hello, I'm a physician, and I actually would like to set limits around how and what I work with, and how, tragically in medical culture, that's sort of like, "How dare you?" Or, depending on who you're talking to, of course, hopefully many are accommodating, but there is this undercurrent of like, no no limits, don't ask for limit, like, if the work's there, you just have to do it, like, beyond any human capacity, sometimes the expectation is irregardless if someone has a disability, and so you showing up and saying, "Hey, I actually would like to request these limits." I can imagine and hopefully you didn't experience, but I can imagine even some colleagues sometimes can find it. I don't know if they use the words like unfair or there can be grumbling or did you experience any of that? Like the kind of
You know, I
collegial aspect?
yeah, it's a good concern to bring up. I would say, in my own experience, nothing major. Like I think, yeah, I think most physician leaders who I disclosed and, had a conversation to, people understood. Like it was not, I didn't feel stigmatized by it. I felt like there was an understanding, okay, this guy just needs to not do these certain shifts and, move on kind of thing. Like it wasn't viewed, in my experience, it wasn't viewed as such a problem like that I thought it might have been, honestly. Like I felt like I had kind of made it worse in my own head. Now that being said, like I'm only one person, and I know that there, I was disclosing traumatic brain injury, and it was a major injury, and people can understand that even internists who don't treat traumatic brain injury, like now that being said, like there's a lot of other conditions that I think would be more questioned, or like, do you really need this accommodation? This is kind of often a concern that kind of comes up in people who have disability. This questioning of the authenticity of it, or, you know, uh, is there some other, could they push through and do it kind of thing? Also, I'm a male, not like I'm half Chinese. I don't consider myself marginalized, underrepresented from a racial ethnic perspective. And I know people who are female and have other marginalized identities often feel even more kind of hesitant to come forward. Or this is not data driven, but this is just based on some conversations I've had with people over the years.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if data would support. But and yeah. So then I'm curious. So you're finding your way. You found a hospital that accepted the accommodations, or you're doing the work. How did that then translate to becoming a disability advocate?
Well, I mean, I was at the beginning, like I was just really focused on getting back to work, like doing clinical work, being part of the team, feeling comfortable, um, and being a doctor, but like at the same time, like I knew I just felt like there was so much wrong with the system that it's just based my personality and my values and that to try to make things better, like in this type of context. So I guess it was just so personal to me that I felt just really motivated to advocate for changes. And yeah, it just led me to a lot of conversations and meeting a lot of different people and reaching out to lots of different leaders in various organizations to try to raise awareness and advocate for a better way forward.
Yeah. Um, what were those, especially like the first few times you did those sorts of conversations, what was that early focus for you? Like what were kind of there's so much that needs to be changed. What felt like the most urgent thing to deliver as a message?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. There's so many things, but I think early on, anyways, I think I was most focused on um, like accommodations, processes, and policies, which there were none, by the way, and also like support. Like, where is the support for doctors? Where are they learning about their rights and their accommodations needs, and like how are they getting educated on this? Like, those are my two things. Like, one, you need guidance, like personal guidance, but also you need resources to understand understand the process, understand all the challenges that come with disability, and there were none. So like I felt like I was coming from a place of like really almost nothing to where we needed to go, like, so just sort of talking about that, I think, fueled a lot of initial conversations.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking, and a bit of it is like, so like the fact that physicians are typically not employees, the fact that we are self-governed is the idea. And there's something like the image that was coming to me as you were like describing that is just like we're all out here like lone cowboys, like and there that's a bit of even the physician identity it can be where, like, oh, don't treat me like all that, or, that can be a real issue because that means that we do not necessarily have a built-in culture of interconnectivity with one another. Yes, we I guess we police one another, but we don't. It's not necessarily like we have this inherent culture of like, yes, we all have limits. Maybe we need help, mutual aid. I have not personally seen that that's like built into medical culture, and even then, therefore, the structures that govern us, like, which of the structures are any of them actually built to support us? Like, is that the initial intention of any of, like, the ministry or the college or these things, or is that technically not their role, and so then it can kind of fall through the gaps because they're just like, isn't that's not what they were built for?
Yeah, I think you're highlighting a theme in that, I think there are a lot of, and there's reasons why, and there still are a lot of benefits that to doctors being self-regulated profession, but there are also limitations, and this is a great example, I think, of that. For me, I think in terms of systems and who should help us, I think, to me, it's clear that our medical associations are positioned best to um, help us with this type of process, as opposed to, the colleges or CMPA or I don't know, I guess hospitals as well. Like, how much are hospitals part of this? That's another question. But I'll just feed off of that. I just wanted to share, because as you were saying, how are we different than employees? This has actually been assessed in the province of Ontario. So through my advocacy work, we were part of the first. Well, I co-led the first policy in a hospital on accommodating physicians with disabilities, which was implemented a couple of years ago, and uh, that was a big step forward. And the Ontario Medical Association caught wind of it and was very interested in this topic. And in fact, they had their legal team look into this and looked at the legislation, and case law in Ontario, and they actually confirmed, and this was not even known to them, initially, but they confirmed that physicians in Ontario are, in fact, even physicians who are independent contractors practicing in hospitals, they are protected under the same duty to accommodate as employees in the hospital setting. And this is a like a wide misconception that physicians are not employees and not bound by the same, you know, legal protections. But on this duty to accommodate for disability, that's not the case. At least in the province of Ontario. Um, However, it is provincially legislated, so we can't sort of verify that outside of Ontario yet. But anyway, it was a great step forward because this is like a legal protection, and not only that, the Ontario Medical Association has developed a resource that educates doctors in Ontario on their rights to accommodations, and so it's fantastic. It's the first of its kind in Canada.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. There's nothing there yet that applies to clinic-based physicians, but the OMA though is aware of that issue, and they are working on a resource for clinic-based physicians as well. So that's apparently to come in the next 6 months or so.
I was curious if you had, I mean, not you're not going to know the final language, but from working in this field and the lawyers looking into it, what's the sense of it? Because in some ways, a piece of the clinic one that's interesting is who does it apply to? Like, who is beholden? Like, say you're a solo doc. I mean, you're beholden to yourself, you'd hope that you would be. But beyond that, is anyone else also potentially beholden to helping you? Like, say, is the ministry in any way beholden to help you? There's a certain restriction, like, if you're in a family health organization, certain number of hours on call. Like, has it ever been applied that way as far as you're aware?
So I don't know about I can't comment for sure on the strictly clinic-based practice. Now, I think there may be differences whether you're, part of a community health center or FHO versus strictly, independently practicing on your own. Whether that's viewed differently, I'm not sure yet, but it's a good question. Like, who is responsible for you?
Hmm.
Now in the hospital, they talk a lot about how it's a shared responsibility. Like, who is responsible for often a concern is often if there's cost associated with accommodations, like who is responsible for the cost of accommodations. And to my understanding, it is a shared duty. So that's, whether that's your physician group, whether that's the hospital, combination of the both. I think that's where things get a bit more gray zone. But the duty still to accommodate is present to the point of undue hardship, and then that point of undue hardship is also like a bit, that's I think case by case in terms of what is truly undue hardship. But yeah, that's the legal language.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's just so it's so useful to know that it even exists and applies. Because I certainly had the assumption like, no, you're just up a creek if you're because you are an independent contractor, even in the hospital setting, and um, so the fact that there is some amount of an umbrella, so you could start a conversation with your admin and your department or whatever, because and if they say it's not my problem, they're technically incorrect legally, that it is a shared problem, including them.
Absolutely. Then that's
Yeah.
a really core point. Like, doctors don't know that they're
Yes.
protected. Not only do they not know, their physician leaders probably or may not know as well. I mean, maybe they do know more now, but there's obviously there's a lack of awareness on like understanding rights. And so it's just such a core place, like it's just such a core place for us to be starting from, like we are legally protected to accommodations in the hospitals. And um whether or not there's policies in place or not, the law is still there. You are legally protected. So yeah, it's really a core message to share with your viewers, because this is such a core area of importance for anybody who has any form of disability um, or chronic health condition. Like, this is really important knowledge.
Yeah. I'm actually curious how you've heard and seen this play out, to give just like a specific kind of example, because I've heard stories of physicians with disabilities who were told like, oh, sorry, you can't do this kind of medicine anymore because you're saying you can't do overnight call. Like I'm thinking overnight is probably a big one. Like, how do you see that playing out, like in real life? Because right now, the stories I've heard, like some people are like, so that I was told I couldn't keep practicing this kind of medicine because of I said I couldn't do overnight anymore, and so then I went, I did a different kind of medicine. That sounds like probably the rights issue could have come up and helped with that. And so, what are you seeing as this awareness is becoming increasing, but isn't obviously prevalent? Um, how are you seeing that this accommodation can happen with things like shared call, overnight call, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's so I can't say I've seen I can't say I've heard of a lot of stories yet, that have changed since the OMA resource has been launched. But I think one of the key messages is that, like, a reasonable, like, flexible scheduling is a pretty reasonable accommodation in a lot, or a lot of physician groups. I think I think it's important, obviously every situation is potentially a bit different in terms of like how that will affect demands on another other physicians in a group, for example, with shared on-call duties. However, I think the key message for the medical community is that if we don't accommodate each other, we will lose physicians from the workforce in a time of human health resource crisis. And this is top of mind for keeping physicians in practice. So if you lose a physician entirely from your physician group, well, then you're going to post a job for somebody else, but then you're all doing the extra work already. And that physician was probably not offered their equitable, or may or may not have been offered their equitable work opportunity as protected by law. So, there's major problems with looking at the what can't you do as opposed to what can you do.
Yeah, both, first of all, technically outside of what the law says we should be doing. So it's good to be inside the law. Good idea. But beyond that, like in terms of like not even thinking of it in a punitive, scary way, though that often does get physicians' attention tragically in a way that just talking about hey, how about if we all got together? But like philosophically, like we are in desperate need of more people to help with the workload because the workload is too much. And the idea that um, there could be someone to share some amount of the load, and even thinking creatively about like maybe there's a way to think creatively about how to share other pieces as well. So I think we just, again, often we think as if it's like my job, my patients. Like I'm very much thinking family medicine. It's like this is my roster, that's it. But I really look forward to hearing, hopefully, future examples of how people can creatively share the general workload in ways where everyone can play to their strengths and as well as having their disability accommodate. Like to me, that actually just seems like if you're thinking of how to build a really efficient and productive system, because we're not all manufactured and all actually have the same parts and same strengths. Like we're humans, we have dynamic ability and strengths. Like it makes sense to operate in that way. That's not a question. That's just a reflection on what you just said.
Yeah, well, for sure. I think this is ethically imperative. There's an ethical imperative. There's a
Yeah.
legal imperative. There's a patient care imperative, like for,
Mm.
offering better patient care. The other thing is like physicians with disabilities are unique and they add an important perspective to their physician groups, their patients, like they're value added because they've had, I mean, whatever the disability was, they've had a health experience, they've had, some a bit more understanding of what it's like to be a patient with limitations and challenges. And I think, that there's a lot of strengths that can come from that experience that can in an overall way improve patient care.
Yes, absolutely.
And by the way, Joan, the other thing um, I wanted to just mention, like this is we're talking a lot about what we describe as structural ableism, which is a system where policies, processes, resources advantage able-bodied people over those with disabilities. I mean, that structural ableism is quite endemic in the medical profession and society at large, for that matter. But but amid that, I would like to point out, that there definitely are lots of cases out there of above average or excellent physician leadership, being creative, finding ways to get their physicians with disabilities working in their clinical workspaces. I mean, this is happening, behind the scenes, kind of across the board. Now, there's a lot of great cases of accommodations working well and being employed well, but I think that the problem is there's still lots that are not being employed well, and that's sort of where we're talking more at length about. But just to point out that that's not across the board.
It's not all doom and gloom. Change is already happening. That's what I'm hearing from you. Do you have any examples? I mean, you don't have to call people up by name, but like what are some recent stories you've heard that you thought, "Oh, like I'm so glad to hear."
Oh, that's good. Um, Well, I mean, my own case, like, I don't want to put putting anyone else's stories out there,
Yeah.
like my own situation, I still work with accommodations. My recovery's improved over many years now. It's been a decade since my injury, but I still don't like I work in a I don't do emergency room consultations. Which is a kind of a normal service week for my division, and that's my major accommodation. But I mean, there's no overnight call on call, like in-house call associated with the work. That's just the nature of the job. But then separate to that, I feel grateful that my department has really supported like um my efforts to lead changes in this space, and I'm being supported to pursue some of those interests as well. So I feel very fortunate that my hospital and department and division have supported me in this process. And I think I think with time there will be more and more physicians willing to share their health stories publicly and slowly break the hesitation and shame associated with disclosing and sharing disability. Because I think we just really need more awareness of all the physicians out there, like myself, who are doing well, working well with disabilities, and it'll normalize it for the rest of the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess speaking then to your story again, so there's the part of the work that your workplace has beautifully honored your accommodations. I also know a common thing is then the person who sometimes is not good at honoring accommodations is self. And so some of your work is self-driven. It sounds like you actually wear multiple hats. So if you're not careful, do you find that you sometimes overstep? Like, how do you pace yourself when the need is urgent? You see everything's happening. You're like, this is ridiculous, all the gaps, and you want to do what you can to fill it. And your brain is your brain, and your body is your body, and you're a human being in a human body. Like, what has that process been like for you to, ensure you're honoring your own accommodations for yourself?
Yeah, I mean that's I'm like everyone else. Like I think there's always more opportunities and um, ways to work and contribute and absolutely for this disability inclusion work, it just kind of keeps growing. I do have to be I'm getting better and I'm trying to be more careful with not overcommitting to too much. And obviously, like many physicians, it's my nature to overcommit and think I can do more than I can.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but but I am learning that I've been facing this, for decades since my brain injury, like knowing I needed to limit myself and be careful, in not overcommitting to too much work. So it's kind of ingrained in the TBI recovery, but yeah, absolutely. I'm still working on that to this day, and trying to put my efforts into work that I feel is most impactful and aligns most with my values.
Well, one thing I observe that may or may not be related to this is when I'm having conversations with people and inviting them on the podcast, I notice that people then are like, oh, and then they like, take an evening spot or they take a different spot. But you booked this podcast interview well in advance. And I was like, I bet he's pacing out how many. Maybe it wasn't that. But I was like, hey, look, you weren't trying to cram it in. You paced it out in advance.
Yeah, well, that's maybe that's why, but
Yeah.
um,
Or you were
absolutely.
just
I
avoiding it. I don't know.
well,
Just kidding.
well, like I don't know. There's often a default of like doing things after work.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like not absolutely not. I'm not gonna accept meetings or even interviews I'm interested in like outside of work hours. Like I'm trying to just you know be careful of not letting work bleed into personal time and family time and yeah, that's I'm pretty focused on that
That's a big one.
time
I
restriction.
Yes, I actually just shut down because you used my calendar link to book this, and I had evening availability, and I actually just shut it down. I do very specific kinds of work in the evening, and I decided that though I love the podcast conversations is not going to be one of them. So,
Well, and by the way,
ongoing process.
yeah, absolutely. And by the way, of course, there's a lot of clinical work that needs to be done in the evenings,
Yes,
and lots of physicians need to, you know, care for society through all the hours of the night and evenings. But yeah, I'm grateful to not have that type of clinical work. and it helps me in my own, overall function and wellness.
Yeah. Well, it's just like I'm grateful that you work in the CTU, so I wouldn't have to. So we're both grateful for the night owls, who I think night owls exist. There's some people who are like, I hate day work, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness, because I just really like sleeping. Sleeping's great.
Yeah,
So if we
agree.
just like honor the diversity of humanity, like I think probably is enough of all of us to share the load. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, one thing I thought is, with all your irons in the fire, are there any projects you're working on now that you're actually like seeking people's input on, like, across this audience? Are there people who you're like, I would really love help on this, or we're looking for this sort of feedback on something? Do you have anything going on that you'd like to invite people to join in on?
Absolutely. So there is a relatively new community of practice that I led online. It's supposed to fill a void. So there's before this community, there was really no national level online space for physicians with disabilities and chronic health conditions to connect with one another. A lot of informal groups, Facebook groups and this and that, but mainly it was, if you knew somebody else to talk to somebody else who you might have a shared experience with. And I'll share that link with you after, but there's a community it was named by the community itself, Physician Health Inclusion, which is meant to be an inclusive space for anybody with health challenges, whether or not you self-identify as having a disability or not. It's designed for you. So those with disabilities or chronic health conditions, um, we really would love to see you join the community. Right now, it's more of a discussion board than anything. There's about 160 members right now. It's only been in place for about 6 months, so it's still early. And we are planning some new events starting in the next month or two, which we've called learning and connecting events, to try to have a presentation about a topic related to disability or chronic conditions as a physician, and then an opportunity as well to talk to other people in the audience, just to have a bit of a shared experience within the community. So those events we're excited about. We're hoping to get people engaged and participating. And yeah, if this topic is speaks to any of your audience, I would really encourage them to join, and
Yeah.
hopefully you can be a part of it all.
This is the one, it's with Brian McLeod, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Brian,
Yeah.
yeah, Brian was interviewed by you, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Brian was a great. So the history of this community is that it was initially, quickly, anyways, it was initially encouraged and sort of collaborated on the CMA online platform. Now, it was exciting. We got it launched, and then unfortunately, the CMA decided that this community offering was no longer within their corporate interests, and they pulled it. And so it was very disappointing for all of us who were leading the community initially. And then thankfully, Brian had access to his own online space, online platform through another organization, and then we've launched separately through his help there. So yeah, very grateful to Brian for getting it back off the ground. And yeah, we're growing, and it's a really positive step, we hope.
That's it's actually just sort of a direct example of saying, like, so if we're going to be self-governing, perhaps, of course, accepting help from outside, please, but like, why don't we also embody a culture of being self-supporting? And you did it. Like, so then, okay, we're going to do this ourselves, and hopefully organizations that are technically supposed to help support physicians can also do such things. But while they're figuring out their mandate, we don't have to wait for them. Like you can have these grassroots initiatives too. That's
Well,
my
and
favorite. Love it.
totally that. And like this, I have a small grant through the Royal College to do this, to lead this community of practice.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so there is like organizational backing, but totally what you're alluding to. Like we're also trying to develop a peer mentorship program within the community,
Mm,
which again is, we're doing it on our own, and we have, we have grants to sort of to support this early phase, like trial type work, but
hmm.
we're hoping that once we show benefit, um, we will get more sustainable funding from outside source to you know keep it going, because honestly, like, improving support for physicians with disabilities and chronic conditions, it aligns with like all strategic plans. Like it aligns with
Yes. It
it,
benefits all organizations that are in the healthcare space,
yeah,
truly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it benefits patients because
Yes.
this keeps physicians in practice, and improves the perspectives of the physician body. And yeah, it's totally that. It aligns with the work of all of these national organizations. So hoping it keeps building.
Yes, it's inevitable. They'll have to get on board. And I think, maybe you don't know, but like, Brian and I met through like the Ontario College of Family Physicians has these peer support groups. And I'm a co-facilitator of the group that supports family physicians with disabilities. That's how we actually first met. So I feel like offline, I have thoughts about and happy to be involved in any way that's helpful for if like training or supporting the peer mentorship stuff, because that's what we do at the OCFP. But that's of course only the FPs, not all the other physicians out there. Um, okay, so last questions. I mean, first is if folks are listening, we're going to put the link in for the physician health inclusion group. And then also I'm going to put your LinkedIn. And are those the only ways you want people to find you? Probably.
Those are the best ways, yeah.
Okay.
I'd welcome anybody who has an interest in this topic to reach out to me directly, and yeah, there's lots of ways to get involved.
Okay, great. And
Yeah.
my last question, which is the last question I ask everyone on the podcast, is considering those listening, which are folks who want to feel more human in their lives, in their workplaces, and specifically in healthcare. They're seeking advice, encouragement, inspiration on how to get started, how to take up the space that they feel like they really need in order for their full humanity to show up in their work, knowing that's going to allow them to actually deliver better healthcare, right? And I would say, especially say someone is like, I know I need this accommodation, but I'm nervous. I've heard some sort of disparaging comments from colleagues who maybe didn't know I have an invisible illness or whatever it is, right? Um, what would be any advice or encouragement you'd want to offer to those that are considering asking for accommodations but are feeling a bit nervous about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, first off, you may feel it, and you probably do feel it, but you're not alone. There are there are no shortage of thousands of physicians across Canada working with disabilities. And so I think that feeling of aloneness of loneliness through this journey is common. And so I think try to connect with others, for example, through our community of practice to understand and realize, from other people's experiences that you are not alone. So it's really important part of that, I think, emotional journey. And then the second part is accommodations are not a sign of weakness, despite the culture of medicine. Remember that disability is not a weakness. And in fact, if you are working with accommodations, you have added benefit to the physician workforce. So I think there's important to highlight the strengths associated with having that lived experience. And then finally, this is proven by some studies in the U.S., but accommodations are essential to your well-being, and those who push through and don't work with accommodations, even if they would benefit from them, that not unexpectedly worsens their overall well-being and makes your work less sustainable, impacts your well-being, and is potentially risky to your career. So it's really just, it may feel like you can just keep pushing through, but there's a better path forward, and I think it's really important to seek out those accommodated work settings if that's what's best in the best interest of your health.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thank you for the hour you've given, Michael. This has been a really enlightening conversation. Like, I literally learn new things, and that's my favorite. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for all that you've been doing. And also thank you for all that you said no to that allowed you to do this so well, because no one ever thinks to thank someone for that. But way to go in setting limits and, allowing yourself to do this sustainably so you're still here, years on doing this work.
Thank you, Joan, for having me. And this limit, like everyone in your audience, this finding the boundaries and the limits is definitely key journey that we're all on. But I encourage everyone out there to keep up their best effort at that as well.
Yeah, we can't be perfectionists about that either. Like, it's all a flow, but
Yeah.
you keep going. All right. Well, for those listening, thanks for listening as always. And we'll talk to you next week. Bye. I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.